For 12 long years, Thaddeus Crow hadn't spoken to another soul. He hadn't needed to. The wind was his only companion, the distant howl of wolves his only threat. Somewhere along the way, people had learned to leave the old farmhouse alone, learned the hard way that the man inside didn't open his door, didn't answer questions, didn't need the world. That night, the storm came like a reckoning. Wind whipped across the empty plains, bending trees to their knees. Thunder cracked overhead so sharp and sudden it sounded like the land itself was tearing open. Rain slammed the roof in angry fists, drowning out every familiar sound except for one. A knock, then another. Then 6 shadows soaked and shivering emerged from the storm and onto his porch. 6 women. Dresses, torn boots, caked in mud, desperation carved into every trembling line of their faces. They looked like ghosts, like trouble. Thaddeus peered through the crack in his reinforced door rifle, raised heart steady. 12 years of silence had built thick walls inside him, and he wasn't about to let them crumble now. The one in front stepped closer. Tall, dark hair plastered to her face, her eyes locked onto his through the narrow opening, eyes that had seen too much. "Please, sir," she said, her voice low but firm. "Just until morning. We have nowhere else to go." Thaddeus tightened his grip on the rifle. "Road's that way," he growled. "Town's 15 miles south." Another voice piped up. Younger, softer. "The bridge is out. Our wagon got stuck. We tried." He spotted her then, barely more than a girl. Her hand pressed to her belly, swollen and round. Pregnant. Something clenched in his chest. Not empathy, not kindness, just instinct. Pregnancy meant complications. Pain. Screaming. Blood. The kind of chaos that didn't belong in his world. "That ain't my problem," he muttered. The older woman stepped forward, silver hair streaked with rain, her spine straight as an iron fence post. "Name's Bertie Walsh," she said. "That's my granddaughter, Clementine. And these are our companions. We don't ask for charity, mister. We can pay." Thaddeus nearly laughed. What could 6 mud-soaked women offer that would be worth breaking his silence, worth the risk? But then he heard it, low and distant, the unmistakable howl of wolves carried by the wind, closer than usual. And then the girl cried out, a sharp, gut-deep cry. Her knees buckled, and Bertie caught her eyes pleading now. "She's in pain," the old woman said. "Been that way since noon." Thaddeus stared at them, storm raging around his porch, instincts battling history. He didn't believe in mercy anymore. But this wasn't about mercy. A woman giving birth in a storm with wolves circling the hills meant noise, blood, predators. It meant death. With a reluctant curse, he unbolted the door, 3 heavy locks sliding back with finality, and opened it just enough for them to pass. "One night," he said, his voice like gravel. "At first light, you're gone." But as they stepped into his home, bringing with them wet footprints, secrets, and the scent of something long buried, Thaddeus Crow felt the shift. 12 years of silence had just been broken, and nothing would ever be the same again. The cabin was warm, but the air inside felt colder than the storm outside. Thaddeus Crow leaned against the far wall, rifle in hand, eyes tracking every move. The women moved with practiced care, peeling off soaked cloaks and boots, but it wasn't the weather they seemed worried about. No, they watched the windows, checked corners, mapped the room like soldiers, not survivors. These weren't desperate townsfolk. Their posture was too proud, their eyes too calculating. The tall one, Magnolia, stood closest to the fire, drying her hands on a cloth like she owned the place. Even under the dirt and rain, her dress showed fine stitching, the kind found in parlors, not prairie wagons. The sisters, Nora Ivy and Della, shared the same high cheekbones, the same clipped way of speaking. Bertie's hands, weathered though they were, bore the careful calluses of a seamstress, not a farmer. And Clementine, young and writhing in early labor, clutched her belly like she was holding in more than just a child. "You're not who you claim to be," Thaddeus said flatly. Magnolia met his gaze without flinching. "Aren't we all pretending to be something we're not? Mr. Crow, you're running," he pressed voice low. "From what silence?" For a moment only the fire cracked. Then Magnolia glanced toward the window where lightning flickered beyond fogged glass. She sighed, and something behind her eyes cracked. "We witnessed something," she said, voice tight. "Something we weren't meant to see." Thaddeus didn't blink. "What? A murder?" The word sucked all the warmth from the room. "3 nights ago in Silver Creek," she continued, "we saw a man named Carson Vale kill a family. Father, mother, 2 small children, over a land deed." Thaddeus stiffened. He knew that name. Everyone in the territory did. Carson Vale, wealthy land baron, self-styled judge and executioner, owned judges, bought sheriffs, controlled men like cattle. He saw us. Nora added, her voice hollow. "We weren't supposed to walk away. And now his men are hunting us," said Ivy. "They're close." As if summoned by her words, a howl tore through the storm. Louder this time. Closer. Thaddeus pushed away from the wall, staring at the locked window. "You brought death to my door. You opened it," Magnolia said quietly. The girl cried out again. Clementine was sweating now, shaking. Bertie moved quickly, checking her pulse. "She's moving fast," the older woman muttered. "We don't have time." Another sound cracked through the night. Not thunder, gunfire. It was distant, but not distant enough. "Get down," Thaddeus barked, yanking the lantern low and moving to the window. Through the storm's veil he saw the flash again just beyond the tree line. "They found us," Magnolia whispered. "No," Thaddeus said, jaw tightening. "You led them here." Another shot rang out, this one closer. Then a voice deep and cold echoed across the fields. "We know you're in there. Come out peaceful and maybe we'll make it quick." The women froze. Thaddeus stepped back from the window, his mind spinning, calculating odds like he used to in another life. 6 women, 1 wounded, 1 in labor, and outside killers, professionals, maybe 6, maybe more. "I need the truth," he said, turning to Magnolia. "All of it. Now." She hesitated. Then, "We're not just witnesses," she said. "We belong to Carson Vale. All of us. He made us watch what he did. Said it was a lesson. Said if we told anyone we'd end up like the Hendricks family. And you ran." "We couldn't stay," Nora added. "Not after the children." Outside, the wind howled again. So did the wolves. And through it all, Thaddeus felt something long buried stir within him. He looked around his cabin, the firelight, the fear, the broken walls of a life rebuilt in silence, and knew this wasn't just a storm. It was war. And it had come knocking. The storm howled like something alive, screaming through the rafters, shaking loose flakes of old dust from the cabin ceiling. But it wasn't the wind that set Thaddeus Crow's nerves on edge. It was the silence between the lightning strikes. Then came the first gunshot. Sharp, distant, measured. He moved to the window in a crouch, keeping to the shadows. Through the sheets of rain he saw a flicker of firelight, where there shouldn't have been any, down by the trees at the edge of the fields. Then another. Muzzle flashes. They were testing the perimeter, measuring distance. "We know you're in there, ladies," a voice shouted through the storm, calm and taunting. "Come out now, and maybe we'll make it quick." The women froze. Magnolia's hand found the nearest pistol. Ivy and Della checked the load on their weapons. Bertie hovered near Clementine, who moaned through clenched teeth, her labor advancing too fast. Thaddeus stared out into the darkness. This wasn't some drunken posse or hired gunslingers. He recognized the calls, the signals. Short whistles, quick flanks, coordinated movement. They were trained, professionals, like him. A fire lit in his blood that he hadn't felt in over a decade. Without a word, Thaddeus crossed the room, unlocked a chest beneath the floorboards, and dragged it into the open. The hinges creaked as he flipped it open, revealing weapons wrapped in oiled cloth, a Colt, .45, a sawed-off shotgun, and a worn leather belt holding ammunition, a blade, and a badge that hadn't seen daylight in 12 years. Magnolia stared. "You were military." Thaddeus didn't answer. His hands moved on instinct, strapping the gear to his hips with the smooth precision of a man long removed from hesitation. He pumped the shotgun. The metallic cha-chak cut through the room like a war drum. "What unit?" Ivy asked. He looked up, eyes cold, the kind that doesn't exist on paper. Lightning flashed again, and for an instant Thaddeus saw movement just beyond the barn. 2 shapes, no 3. Closing in. "They're surrounding the cabin," he said, moving toward the front door. "We have to get out of here," Magnolia whispered. "We can't," Bertie said sharply. "Clementine's too far along. Move her now, and we'll lose her and the baby." Another voice called out. This one different, colder. 5 minutes, then we start burning. Thaddeus turned to the women, his voice steady. "I need positions. Della back window, Ivy east wall, Nora stay with Bertie and the girl. Magnolia." She lifted her chin. "I'm with you." He nodded, handed her a pistol. "Point and shoot. Don't hesitate." Outside, the wolves of Carson Vale crept closer. Thaddeus could hear them now, boots slogging through mud weapons being checked, orders murmured through the dark. They thought they were hunting frightened women and a tired old farmer. They had no idea what was waiting inside. They'd made one mistake too many. They'd cornered a ghost, and ghosts don't die easy. The first shot shattered the front window. Glass exploded inward as Thaddeus dropped to one knee, firing into the darkness before the echo had even faded. A man outside crumpled with a grunt, falling into the mud without so much as a scream. "They've breached the line," he shouted. Gunfire erupted all around the cabin. Bullets punched through walls and splintered beams. Smoke from the fireplace mingled with gunpowder stinging eyes and burning lungs. The storm outside raged, but it couldn't drown out the sharp cracks of violence inside. Della screamed from the back window, hit but not down. Her shoulder was bleeding, but her hand stayed firm on the trigger. Ivy fired in controlled bursts, each shot deliberate, deadly. Magnolia crouched beside Thaddeus, her fingers trembling around the pistol, but she held her ground. Through it all, Clementine cried out. The baby was coming. Bertie barked orders through the chaos. Blankets boiled water. "Help me get her onto the bed." The women moved like a machine under fire. Nora ripped strips of cloth with shaking hands. Magnolia fetched water with one arm while aiming with the other. The cabin was turning into a battlefield and a birthing room. Then the fire started. A bottle of accelerant crashed against the back wall, flames roaring to life as smoke curled toward the ceiling like black fingers. "They're torching us," Thaddeus growled, pumping the shotgun. "We're out of time." But Clementine couldn't be moved. She was too far gone, face soaked with sweat, hands gripping the bedding, a scream building in her throat with every contraction. "They'll burn us alive," Ivy shouted, coughing through the smoke. "Then we hold them back," Thaddeus said. "We don't let them cross this threshold. Not while she's bringing life into this world. Another gunman charged the door. Thaddeus met him with a blast that shredded the frame and flung the body into the yard. "Two down," he shouted. But there were more shadows flitting through the trees, closing in flames crackling behind them like applause from hell. Then it happened. In the center of the smoke and gunfire, in a room lit by muzzle flash and firelight, Clementine let out a scream that broke through the thunder, and over it a sound answered, tiny, fierce, impossibly pure. A baby's cry. Birdie lifted the newborn blood-slick and screaming into the air. It's a girl. For a heartbeat, the room froze. Even the gunfire seemed to hesitate. Thaddeus turned breath-ragged, staring at the fragile new life cradled in the arms of a woman who had spent years surrounded by death. A child born not in safety or peace, but in the middle of fire and fury, a symbol of defiance, of hope, of life clawing its way into a world that had long since forgotten how to welcome it. Outside, a voice roared again. Last chance, Crow, step aside. But Thaddeus had already made his choice. He racked the shotgun and looked at the flames dancing on the walls of his past. You came for death, he muttered, but she came for life, and he was ready to protect her with everything he had left. The flames were climbing higher, turning the walls of Thaddeus's cabin into orange, cracking skeletons. Smoke billowed through every gap in the wood. The heat was unbearable, suffocating, but the real fire was yet to come. It walked in through the front door like it owned the place. Framed by fire and shadow, Carson Vale stepped inside immaculate despite the chaos. His tailored coat was untouched by rain, his silver hair combed neatly as if he hadn't just marched through a war zone. His eyes swept the room like a butcher choosing his cuts. "Ladies," he said, voice smooth as silk and twice as cold, "I believe you have something that belongs to me." Behind him, 3 armed men entered with military precision guns, raised eyes scanning every target. Magnolia tensed beside Thaddeus. Ivy and Della lifted their pistols with shaking hands. Birdie shielded Clementine and the newborn behind a scorched table, her old hands trembling. Vale smiled at the scene. "No need for dramatics, Mr. Crow, though I must admit your reputation precedes you. Captain Thaddeus Crow, Union's little ghost. Quite the legend." Thaddeus said nothing, but his grip on the shotgun tightened. "Surprised I know who you are?" Vale continued, chuckling. "You shouldn't be. Men like you don't disappear clean, especially after Millfield." That word hit like a hammer. Thaddeus flinched. Magnolia's eyes darted toward him, a silent question in her gaze, but there was no time for answers. "We're not here to dredge up ancient failures," Vale said, waving a hand. "We're here for my property." His gaze drifted to each woman in turn. 5 of you. 5 who broke your contracts. 5 who saw something they shouldn't have. Then he looked to Birdie, and one who was supposed to keep them in line. The room seemed to freeze. Magnolia turned sharply. Ivy gasped. Birdie didn't speak. 15 years of loyalty, Vale said, almost fondly. She's been my eyes, my ears. The reason I've stayed ahead of every escape, every whisper. "No," Magnolia's voice was raw. "You're lying." "Am I?" Vale smiled wider. "How do you think I always found them?" Always knew when to tighten the leash. All eyes turned to Birdie. Her lips quivered. She clutched the newborn closer to her chest like a shield. But the truth was written in every wrinkle of her face. "Birdie." Clementine's voice was barely audible. "You were one of us." Birdie's voice cracked. "I was. I am. But I needed the money. My husband was dying. My daughter owed Vale more than she could ever repay. I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice, Magnolia snapped. Tears streamed down Bertie's cheeks. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. But after what we saw in Silver Creek, those children, I couldn't do it anymore. Vale's smile faded, and that, he said coldly, was your mistake. He raised his pistol. Thaddeus stepped forward, shotgun aimed. You pull that trigger and I swear you won't take another breath. This is between me and the traitor, Vale hissed. Step aside. Bertie didn't flinch. She looked down at the newborn girl in her arms, the tiniest spark of peace on her face amid the firestorm. She didn't choose any of this, she whispered. None of them did, and neither did I. But I can choose now. Vale's gun twitched. You chose wrong, he snarled, and the fire roared higher, preparing to consume them all. The heat was unbearable now. Flames licked the ceiling, turning beams to glowing bones. Smoke churned in thick, choking waves, and every breath seared the lungs. The cabin groaned like a dying animal. It had minutes left, maybe less, but Thaddeus Crow had only seconds. Across the burning room, Carson Vale stood calm, pistol aimed at Bertie, whose arms curled protectively around the crying newborn. Magnolia, Ivy, and Della had their weapons up, but too slow, too far, too late. Thaddeus didn't hesitate. Boom! The shotgun roared. The blast hit Vale square in the chest, the force lifting him off his feet. He flew backward into the flames, his perfect suit catching fire as he crashed into the burning wall like a marionette with cut strings. For a heartbeat, the world stood still. Then chaos broke loose. Down, Thaddeus shouted. Vale's remaining men opened fire bullets, splintering what was left of the cabin. Magnolia ducked behind the overturned table, pulling Ivy with her. Della dropped to one knee, despite her wounded shoulder, and fired 2 clean shots. 2 gunmen fell. The third turned to run, but there was nowhere to go. Smoke and fire had turned the exits into molten death. He made it 2 steps before the back wall collapsed, burying him in burning timber. His scream was brief. Thaddeus turned back to the women. We have to move now. Clementine was pale, soaked in sweat, barely conscious but alive. Bertie cradled the infant to her chest, face streaked with soot and tears. Magnolia rushed to Thaddeus's side, eyes wide but steady. Together, they lifted Clementine onto a makeshift sling fashioned from blankets. Della and Ivy grabbed what little supplies they could carry, bullets cloth, the last jug of clean water. The cabin groaned again. A fiery rafter crashed down behind them. Go Thaddeus kicked out the back wall where fire hadn't yet devoured the boards. Cold night air rushed in like salvation. One by one, they scrambled through the gap, smoke at their heels, the baby's cries rising above the roar of collapse. They tumbled into the mud, gasping, coughing, soaked by the lingering drizzle of the storm. Behind them, the cabin collapsed inward with a roar, flames shooting into the sky like a signal fire to heaven. 12 years of silence, of solitude, of self-imposed exile gone in a single night. Gone in fire, gone in blood. They didn't speak right away, just stood together in the dark watching the inferno that had once been Thaddeus Crow's fortress. Bertie held the baby tighter. Magnolia reached for Thaddeus's hand, rough fingers brushing against hers. Della stood tall, despite the pain. Ivy dropped to her knees in the mud, whispering a prayer. They had survived. Not just the fire, not just the bullets, but Carson Vale. His reign was over, burned to ash along with every secret he'd used to control them. And for the first time in years, Thaddeus felt the wind not as a warning, but as a promise. A new chapter was coming, and he would not face it alone. The fire had died by morning. Where Thaddeus Crow's cabin once stood was now nothing but a smoldering ruin, charred timber ash and silence. Yet in that silence something stirred. Not grief, not loss. Beginning. The storm had passed, leaving behind a damp hush across the plains. Mud clung to their boots as the women huddled together near the tree line, the smoke curling behind them like a final goodbye. Magnolia was the first to speak. "We go west." Her voice was steady. Not a question, a decision. "California," said Della, nodding slowly. "Far enough that Vale's name dies with the wind." "We've got money," Nora added, pulling a small pouch from her coat heavy with coin. "Enough for a start." Ivy looked to Bertie, who stood apart from them, arms wrapped around the newborn like a second chance she hadn't asked for, but couldn't let go of. "Are we all going?" Ivy asked carefully. Bertie didn't answer at first. Her eyes stayed on the horizon. Her voice, when it came, was hoarse. "I don't deserve to. You betrayed us," Magnolia said, blunt as ever, "but you also saved us. When it counted." Bertie looked down at the infant girl in her arms, the tiny thing wrapped in the last clean blanket they could salvage. She was asleep now, her breath steady despite the night she'd been born into. Clementine, still weak but conscious, reached for her daughter. "Her name is Sarah." Thaddeus froze. He didn't speak, didn't move, but the name hit him like a thunderclap. Clementine met his gaze. "You said once there was someone, a wife, a child. I thought maybe she could carry their name forward." For a long moment the old soldier said nothing. Then he nodded, slow and silent, and looked away before the emotion cracked the surface. Bertie stepped forward. "If I come with you, it's not for redemption. I know I can't earn that. It's for her." She glanced at Sarah. "She deserves more than ashes and regrets." "You're welcome," Clementine whispered. Magnolia gave a single nod. Then it settled. They packed what little they had, spare rounds, rations, wet clothes, and dry hope. When they turned toward the westward road, they all turned except one. Thaddeus stood alone, staring back at the blackened wreckage of his past. "You comin'?" Magnolia asked. He shook his head. "I've got work to finish." She frowned. "What kind of work?" "The kind that doesn't end with Vale," he said. He had partners, judges, sheriffs, men who profit off pain and call it law. Magnolia stepped closer. "You're going after them." He met her eyes. "Someone has to. Someone who knows the dark they hide in." A beat passed. Then she gave him a smile, soft, genuine. "Well, make sure they know your name before they fall." He returned it with a look that almost reached a smile. "You'll be all right." She glanced back at the others, Della adjusting her coat, Ivy holding her sister close, Bertie lifting Sarah into the morning light. "We're going to build something new," she said. "Not just survive. Live." He nodded. "Then go west." As the women started down the road, Thaddeus remained behind, shotgun slung across his back, a knife strapped to his hip, and a new purpose settling into his bones. He wasn't a ghost anymore. He was a reckoning. 6 months later, winter had settled over the high plains, quiet and cruel. Snow blanketed the earth like a burial shroud. The trees stood bare, their branches clawing the sky, and the wind whispered through the ravine behind what remained of Thaddeus Crow's land. But there was warmth now. Not from the hearth that hadn't yet been rebuilt, but from the cabin he'd raised with his own hands. Smaller than the last one. Simpler. No fortifications, no hidden armory, just a roof, 4 walls, and a door he no longer kept bolted. He was splitting firewood when the letter came. The post-rider left it tucked under a stone by the path, too wary to come closer. Word still lingered about what had happened here, half whispers of fire and ghosts and a man who'd walked into the dark and come back changed. Thaddeus turned the envelope over in his calloused hands. His name was written in careful looping script. The paper smelled faintly of lilac and smoke. From Sacramento, Magnolia. He sat by the stove, steam rising from his coffee, and opened it with fingers that had once only known weapons. Dear Mr. Crow Sarah took her first steps yesterday. Stumbled right into Bertie's arms. She cried, Bertie not the baby. Clementine's stronger now, and the sisters have found work. Della's teaching kids to read. Ivy's sewing. Nora watches over us like a hawk, still won't let anyone near the door without a question and a glare. We're safe. More than that, we're living. And it started with one night and one man who decided to open a door he'd kept shut for 12 years. You gave us a chance to run. But more than that, you gave us the courage to stop running. Thank you. Monsieur Thaddeus folded the letter slowly, as if it might shatter in his hands. Outside, the wind howled again, but it no longer sounded like a warning. Just a sound. Just the world turning. He walked to the window, watching snowflakes spiral from the sky, and thought of Sarah. A child born in fire and blood. A name resurrected from ashes. A life that didn't just carry memory, it transformed it. He thought of Magnolia's words of the women rebuilding something no bullet could destroy, and of Bertie, who had made a final choice that rewrote everything that came before. Forgiveness. It wasn't a pardon. It wasn't a clean slate. It was a daily battle, just like the kind he now fought across the frontier, tracking the last of Carson Vale's allies dragging rot into the light. But he finally understood something. Forgiveness isn't something you earn once. It's something you choose every morning, like picking up a weapon or putting one down. He slipped the letter into the box beside his bunk, next to an old photo of his wife and child, faded but not forgotten. Then he stepped into the cold with his coat, his rifle, and a purpose carved from flame and regret. The past would not bury him, not anymore.